I'm going to read from Carolina Schutti's novel Einmal, muss, über, weiches, Gras, gelaufen, sein. It was a European Prize for Literature winner in 2015, but is only now going to be published in English this October. Publisher is Bullaun Press, a small Irish publisher specialising in literature in translation. The English title is Without Waking Up. I'm going to read a piece from the second chapter, second of 7. A feathery cave. Don't just stand in the doorway, says her aunt. Maja pushes herself away from the doorframe, takes a step forwards towards her aunt. Has it arrived? Asked Maja. Her aunt dries her wet hands on the tea towel, takes her knitted jacket down from the hook, slips into the right sleeve first, then the left. She always does the right sleeve first. Closes 2 buttons, then rolls up her sleeves and turns back to the sink. Maja gives her aunt a sideways glance and, without a word, takes a tea towel and helps with the drying. The delicate Sunday china, white porcelain with a light blue pattern. The freshly dried plates and cups belong beneath the others in the cupboard. Maja climbs onto a chair. Her aunt holds up 4 plates and Maja inserts 2 plates together under the stack. Her aunt has taught her this so that all the dishes are used in rotation. She can manage the cups on her own, and her aunt has already put the glasses on their own shelf. Then comes the cutlery. Be careful, says her aunt, the knife is sharp. She says that every time, and Maja grasps it by the handle and dries the blade carefully. When her aunt isn't looking, she runs her finger cautiously along the blade before returning it to the kitchen drawer. The heavy pans are the only things that make her nervous, and she needs both hands to carry them to the table, drying the insides first, then turning them upside down to dry the base and handles. She leaves them on the table, and her aunt hangs them up on the hooks. The sound as they strike the thick stone wall breaks the hour of silence. They don't talk during meals, and they are too busy taking care not to break anything while they're washing up. Talking is a distraction anyway. People talk too much, her aunt says. Maja hangs the tea towel on the back of a chair to dry. Her aunt pulls the sleeves of her jacket down to cover her wrists and rubs her reddened hands together. Has it arrived? Maja asks again, and her aunt gives her a quick look and shakes her head. It's Sunday, and there's no post on Sundays, and nothing will come now. Easter was 3 weeks ago. Her aunt shoos Maja out of the kitchen, opens one of the little windows and closes the door behind her. The child has got big, she thinks. 3 years is no time for an old woman, and an eternity for a child. How it seems like yesterday that her father was going in and out of here. She brought him up because his mother did not want him. How he has to live his life without this child who arrived here all at once. A child who looked so like his wife, about whom he never spoke again. Maja stands in the doorway, observing her aunt as she ties her shoelaces, carefully, then throws a fleeting glance in the mirror hanging high on the wall. I'll be back in 2 hours, she says. Don't get up to any mischief. It is chilly in the parlour. Maja draws the red blanket around her shoulders. There's paper and kindling in the stove, ready just in case it needs lighting. Her father owes his life to this stove, her aunt once told her. The winter he was born was particularly harsh, and the stove was lit regularly. Her aunt had wrapped the frail baby in cloths and placed him in a basket on the tiled seat. But she said nothing about the cards, and she never spoke about why Maya's father had gone away either, just as she had got used to calling him Papa. Maya's memory focuses on the moment when she had entered the house for the first time. Her father had gone ahead of her and sat at the shiny wooden table. Maja stayed standing in the doorway and didn't understand what her aunt wanted from her. Don't just stand in the doorway, she must have said. That's what her aunt always says whenever Maja leans against the doorframe, waiting for her aunt to thrust the tea towel into her hand or point at the kitchen dresser with her chin when it's time for Maja to set the table. It was dusky in the room. Maja had counted the little windows. Adds in, 2, 3. She could already count to 10, but there were only 3. 3 little windows in thick stone walls, a wood-panelled ceiling. A lamp with a linen shade above the dining table gave out a feeble light. Her aunt turned her back to her and rattled cutlery. Something was cooking on the stove. Maja didn't recognise the smell rising from the pot and couldn't even decide whether it was pleasant or not. She stood, rooted in the doorway, looking in turn from her father to her aunt and back again. Her father's face was half in shadow. No one was looking at her. Her aunt placed a glass of milk on the table in front of her father, then stirred the saucepan. Her father was staring at the tabletop. "Well then," he said. And he repeated, "Well?" After a time that seemed endless to Maja, her aunt took a step or two towards her. Maja stood in front of the flower-patterned skirt of her apron. Her aunt wiped her wet hands on it and pushed her towards the table. Maja sat down opposite her father, watching as he drank his milk. He had visited her in the children's home. The matron had led Maja to understand that he was her father, and this father had taken her for a walk and treated her to ice cream. Strawberry ice cream. When they returned to the home, Maja stood in the middle of the playroom. "Strawberry ice cream," she shouted, pointing to her mouth and her dress, which was flecked with pink spots. A girl had stood in front of her, run her tongue over Maja's lips. Then the screaming began, and a care worker came in looking severe and, without a word, grabbed the girl under the arms and carried her out of the room. Some time later, the same care worker had packed a few bits of clothing into a bag with the matryoshka on top, put Maja's shoes on her, and pushed her outside the door to where her father was waiting. She had to go with him because her mother was lying under the ground, so her father was going to look after her. Maja's aunt put a glass of warm milk in front of her, sprinkled a little cocoa powder into it, stirred it noisily, and gestured for her to drink. She sat down with them, looked at Maja, then stretched out her arm and patted the child's head. "Whatever will be, she said. Her father said nothing.